G'day folks, I'm John. So today I wanted to talk to you about the 7 common mistakes that beginners make when they start shooting film. The number one most common mistake that beginners make when starting film photography is not loading the film properly. Now, when you load the film, after you've loaded the film into the canister, make sure, and you've closed the lid, now make sure you pay attention to this rewind knob. Even put it up so that when you're actually winding the film and advancing it, you've got to make sure that this rewind knob moves. Otherwise, if it doesn't move, because I don't have any film in here, so it's not going to move, but it should move as you wind the film and then take the shot. If it does not move, that means your film's not loaded properly. So it's not moving on the take-up spool, and it's just going to be a waste of time. Beginner mistake number 2 is that you do not use the correct film speed for the conditions. So you don't understand ISO and you just go and grab any film speed and think that it'll just do, but you've got to pay attention to your conditions. Like today we've got a beautiful sunny day, so best to shoot at say 100 speed film or 200 speed film, and if it's slightly overcast you might want to consider a 400 speed film, and it's getting towards the dusk and sort of evening hours, you'd shoot anything from about 800 to 3200 speed film, which is usually black and white. Also indoors, you might consider choosing a high-speed film from anything from about 800 onwards. Cine still's very popular at night as well. Beginner mistake number 3 is not exposing your film properly, so either underexposing or overexposing. Now with colour film, the leeway is quite good, so you could probably overexpose by up to 3 stops for most film, especially Portrait 400, which is quite versatile, and you can probably underexpose that by about 1 or 2 stops and you'll still get fairly decent results. The exposure rule is basically different from analog photography and digital photography. With digital photography, you're told to expose for the highlights because you don't want the highlights blown out because you won't be able to recover them in post. Whereas the shadows you can recover because you have a vast dynamic range especially with digital. And with film photography, it's the complete reverse. So with film photography, you expose for the shadows because the highlights are quite protected with film, and film is quite versatile, especially colour film. You could probably overexpose by 3 stops and you should be fine, depending on whether it's professional grade like Portrait 400 film, or if you've got like consumer grade film like Kodak Gold or Color Plus. If your camera doesn't have a light meter, then it's best to get yourself a light meter like this one. That's a Sekonic. It's like a handheld light meter. Or otherwise, you can also get a phone app. This one's called Light Meter, and that's brilliant because it calculates instantaneously the light that's coming in, and you could use that to get a proper exposure on your film shots. Otherwise, a bit more advanced, or if you don't have a light meter at all, you can learn the Sunny 16 rule. For the Sunny 16 rule, it usually means that if you choose, say, an aperture of f16, then the shutter speed will correspond to the ISO of your film. So if the ISO of your film is, say, you're shooting 400 film, then your shutter speed will be 1/400, or because you can't, some cameras don't have 1/400, just choose 1/500 as. The 4th most common mistake that beginners make, and some advanced photographers as well, seasoned pros, is not adjusting your settings between shots. Now that could happen with digital as well, but usually the camera takes care of it for you unless you're shooting in manual mode. It'll adjust the exposure accordingly. With film, you can't do that. You need to make sure that the exposure settings, like the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO is fixed, are adjusted. So you need to adjust your shutter and the aperture accordingly between shots. And a lot of the time you're in the moment, you forget to do that, and you end up with an underexposed or an overexposed image. Now, in some cases, film is quite forgivable, and if it's overexposed, you should be fine by a stop or two. But if it's underexposed, you may experience some problems where you'll get a lot of dark shadows. And the fifth most common mistake that beginner photographers make is not storing your film properly. So basically, if you're not going to be using the film for quite a while, you need to make sure that it's stored in a cool place, cool, dry place. And if you won't be using it for a while, it's best to store it like in a refrigerator. But make sure that once you do use the film, that you thaw it down and bring it back to room temperature before you shoot it. If you're traveling, don't leave your film in a hot car, because that'll tend to wreck the film and cause all color casts and all sorts of things. Be sort of similar to shooting expired film, where you don't know, the results are varied and they're very random. The sixth most common mistakes beginner photographers make when shooting film is not being patient. When you're shooting film is about slowing down, being in the moment, taking the time, to compose your image, to watch every moment that's happening around you and look for those situations that'll produce a beautiful photo. Because of the cost of film, you can't go around just spraying and praying. You need to be more intentional with your shooting. That's why you need to be more patient when shooting film, and film forces you to do that, because otherwise it'll be a drain on your wallet if you don't. So when you're shooting film, slow down, enjoy the process, focus on the composition and learning the scenes that are happening around you, instead of just willy-nilly. It's like in a digital camera. The seventh most common mistake that film photographers make, and that's mainly due to shooting long exposure photography at night, is not accounting for what's called reciprocity. So you need to account for reciprocity, because because film is not linear in its nature, so that you can't just take a long exposure based on a calculation that you've done, like with digital. Based on the exposure settings like the aperture, the shutter speed and the ISO. You need to account for reciprocity as well. And the way to do that is best to get an app. Let me know in the comments what mistakes you have made shooting film as a beginner or a seasoned professional. We all make mistakes. Doesn't matter how long we've been in the business. Sometimes we just forget to load film properly, or other things happen. So let me know in the comments of what you've done that's be considered a mistake and would be very helpful for other people to avoid, because as you know, the price of film is skyrocketing and we need to keep costs down. If you've enjoyed this video, I would love a like, and if you want more content from me regarding analog photography and some digital photography as well, please subscribe to my channel, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you. Bye bye.